Hey everybody, this is Dr. Flight. It's good to see you, or it's good to be seen, I guess. So this video lecture is going to be on something called influencing behavior, and it's going to illustrate a model. BCOS will be the model, where we are trying to understand some of the psychological steps or motivations or influences really on how people make decisions, which ultimately will influence behavior. So we're going to talk about benefits, costs, the influence of others, and the influence of self. So BCOS is kind of the idea here. And so anyways, again, reach out to me if you have any questions, and we'll just jump right into this and have this idea of influence of others. Okay, we want to start real quick here with this recollection of what we've said before, just making sure that you are cool with this idea that our goal is to influence behavior somehow. That's what marketers tend to want to do. And it might be how we define behavior is in many, many different ways. It might be just we want to influence how people are thinking, or maybe doing, or acting, or feeling, or something along those lines. So our goal then is to influence some type of behavior, and this could take the form of many different things. It could be, again, making a purchase or something along those lines. But at first, before somebody can behave, we need to get them to think about it and commit to it mentally or psychologically. Oftentimes, we want to induce people to do things like buying products, giving up some undesirable behavior, not starting a new bad behavior, but starting a good, healthy behavior, donating money and time, volunteering, getting people to vote, and so forth. So if you can think about any of these, some of them are real tangible things. Some of them are just psychological, like I want to change a behavior or an attitude. But before any of these changes or these things can take place, somebody has to commit to and want to do them mentally. So that's kind of what we want to talk about. And this BCOS model suggests that when we frame a challenge, a problem, or a need in terms of the benefits, costs, what others will think, and how it fits your own self-image, those four elements tend to be very persuasive in causing people to change how they think and therefore change the behavior that they have. So there are lots of theories out there on why people behave the way they do. But generally speaking, if you think of this as a three-step process where there's some psychological factor or influence that has to take place, which then says, okay, if you know about a problem or an issue, another challenge is I've got to motivate you to change. And then finally, there's some type of a behavior that I need to make you or encourage you to do. So some of the psychological stuff is really what we're going to focus on today in the BCOS model. Kind of like inducing some type of recognition within the person that they need to change their behavior or change their way of thinking. When somebody feels a need to change, sometimes it's the result of something we call psychological dissonance. And dissonance is a state of mind where there's an agitation or a tension that is created because something just doesn't quite feel right. And so when something doesn't quite feel right, your body wants to change and your mind wants to change so that whatever it is that doesn't feel right can be corrected. So when you don't quite feel right or think something is the way it should be, sometimes we think of that as like a disconnection or an inconsistency. And again, it's sometimes we would think of this as dissonance as the concept. So that's kind of one of the underlying theories that some of this psych work is based upon. And if you can, as a marketer, either recognize dissonance or create dissonance among your clients, then you can begin to convince them that they need to find a solution that will help resolve the dissonance, so that they can feel better about themselves. So moving on to the model, the BCOS model that Andreasen in 1995 created. One of the things we're going to talk about here, there's this idea that benefits that of the model, the benefits of receiving a good or the benefits of engaging in a service or a product should better the consumer or better the client after they have experienced it. Importantly, consumers evaluate benefits relative to what their current or future anticipated needs are or state. And so what we want to do is be able to convince the respondent that they'll be better off with our solution, our product, or our service than they are without it. So there are lots of different types of benefits that the consumer can receive and that we can talk about in terms of trying to convince them to change their behavior. We have physical benefits and then psychological benefits and then also social benefits. Physical benefits can be associated with some tangible result or some observable feature. So the benefits tend to be durable, lasting over a long period of time. Physical benefits may be something where you own a product or you can transfer that product to somebody else. Physical benefits may actually be physically contained within the product as a feature or the service that we're offering. So you go to a theater, you watch a show, but you're sitting in a nice comfortable chair as opposed to a hard bench. That's like a physical benefit that you physically enjoy the actual process. So physical benefits are there. Psychological benefits would be, joy, happiness, perceptions of safety and security, more developed states of their sense of self, satisfaction and accomplishment. So you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and think of like the higher ones that are more psychological in nature, and that would be kind of in that area. Social benefits deal with how people view you and view your presence, among others and what they think about. So the social benefits actually also tie into the O part of the BCOS model, and when we talk about others, we'll talk about them in just a second or two. So benefits is a big component. What benefits can you offer the client by them accepting your solution to their problem? C here, the C component deals with costs. So what are the costs or the perceived things that the consumer has to give up that they will need to offer to receive the benefits that they're going to receive? There are certainly financial costs. We can always think about some monetary expenses that are expected sometimes when we have to buy a product or service. There's time costs. So in order to engage in a product or service, we have to give up some time to either go get it or buy it or participate in it. There are energy and effort costs where we have to physically and mentally work to earn this. Think about earning a college degree. How much mental effort? It's a lot, right? You have to think about and put a lot of energy behind not only the cost financially and cost of time, but you have to engage mentally. Friends may be a cost. So if making a decision to accept one offer has an influence on your family and friends and others in your life, then that's a consideration that you would want to make. There's something called an opportunity cost. Something that we deal with when we make one decision. It means that we have to give up another decision. If I decide to go to church at one location this week, it means that I'm not going to church at a different location because I can't be in two places at once. I'm giving up an opportunity. If I decide to go to SIUE, that's a 4-year commitment, with meaning that I can't go work, I can't go to a different university. I can't do other things because I've got what we call a path dependency. I've got to go down this route now, and that obligates me, and it takes away other opportunities that I otherwise would have. Finally, another cost that we're going to list here is this idea of habit and routine and something called discontinuity. So this is a good term for you to know, discontinuity. It means that you're discontinuing a behavior, and that discontinuing a behavior may have some type of a cost. If I'm a smoker and I decide to stop smoking, it means I'm discontinuing my smoking habit, and the habit has to be broken. And breaking a habit is sometimes difficult to do. It's hard to do. We may have a cost where we associate with breaking a habit, and we have to deal with that appropriately. So discontinuity or habits. So these 6 big things: financial time, energy and effort, a loss of friends or a cost of friends or change in friends' behavior, opportunities that we have to give up in order to accept an offer, and then changes in routine behaviors and patterns of behavior and habits are perceived as a potential cost as well. Continuing on with this idea of costs, and we also have a notion of value. So I'm interjecting this little thought here, that value plays a role in a relationship between both benefits and cost. You have to think about these two things together, because for every benefit you're having to give something up, and for every cost you're getting something in return. So this idea of a value proposition, or value in general, is a concept that's rooted in something we call exchange theory. And it's this notion that we often estimate value as a relationship between benefit and cost. So this is just like a little interjection or a thought to think about in the context of this model. We think about benefits and costs as a trade-off and sort of like a ratio between the two. If my benefits I'm going to receive are perceived as greater than the costs I'm going to give up, then I'll feel like I'm getting a good deal. Otherwise, if I feel like I'm paying more than I'm really getting in return, then I'll feel like it's a bad deal for me. So one of the motivators here psychologically, and to kind of convince folks to, motivate them to actually commit to a behavior, is that we have to illustrate and show that the benefits that they perceive to receive will be greater than the costs they perceive that they have to give up. And so again, that's kind of the combination. If we look at B and C together, benefits and costs together, that's really what we're thinking about when we think about value. And that's a very, very important concept when we want to influence other people. All right, so the O in this model is for others. Behavior is not solely driven by the anticipation of benefits and costs. People are also very influenced by other external forces. When we talk about others, we talk about other people, or people we call as referents. And so they clearly have some decision on us. And when we think about making a decision, a lot of times we're not the only ones in the decision-making process. Sometimes we ask for advice. Sometimes the decision we make is going to influence other people or have an effect on other people. So we want to make sure that they are involved in our decision-making processes a lot of the time. Generally, the goal of a consumer is to gain approval from other people, or have some influence on them, or gain approval from people who they respect. Referents may provide input regarding the consumer's attitudes and thoughts towards the offer itself. Referents may also be aspirational, to which the decision maker aspires to be like, or they may have a negative influence where the decision maker wants to avoid them. So if I look at a group of people who I want to emulate to be, or I want to be like, I may try to mimic or copy their behavior in some way, and that would be very influential on me. Though these other people that I look up to are influencing my decision-making process because I aspire to be like them. So that's kind of the idea of others. We're talking about reference groups and referencing. This is external influence then that would be on the consumer as they make this decision-making process. The last step here, last stage, would be self-identity, or the perceptions of self that consumers have. So one of the ideas is that people have an image of what they want to be and who they are, and we often make decisions that support the image of ourselves, our identity and who we are and who we think we are. We want to support that idea, and so if we're making a decision, that's going to influence our identity, it will be an identity supporting type of decision. There are a lot of different actual definitions of self-image, and identity. Two here that I would proffer is your current or perceived self, and then the other one we'll talk about is what we call an ideal self, or a desirable future self. So if I think about my current and perceived self, it's what I think I am today, who I am today, the type of person I am, the clothes I wear, the behaviors I have. It's influenced by my stage of life. And the people I'm associating myself with. And we want to maintain a self-image often, and we want to support the self-image of the person who we think we are today. So it's our perceived self. A lot of self-maintenance ideas come into play here, where if we feel like we're straying away from ourselves, we'll correctively change our behavior to mask that. If I view myself as a thin young person, then I look in the mirror and I see, oh, I'm getting older and I'm getting fatter, then I'm gonna feel like I'm contradicting myself, and I'll be motivated to dress younger, maybe health-wise, maybe be more active and things like that to support this perceived self-image. The second concept here is a future or ideal self. So not only do we think about who we are today, but a lot of times we consider what we want to be in the future, and how we perceive what we'll be like 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We think about what type of lifestyle we want to live and all of that. And so we begin to modify or change our behavior to reflect our future self or ideal self. So if we can spark in a person a recognition that they don't want to be who they are today, but they'd rather be a better version of themselves, that would be an ideal self or a future self that they could work toward being. And that's a big psychological motivator. Okay, so that deals with this idea of self, and thus completes our model. We have benefits, costs. We interjected value in there. We talked about others, and we talked about self. So we want to influence people's behavior, but we understand that this is a psychological process first, which may involve creating some dissonance, where consumers or clients feel an internal psychological tension that things aren't quite right, but they're not quite sure. So we want to offer something for them to solve this dissonance, and then consumers can think about the benefits, costs, and the influence of others, and then finally themselves. So this is a solid model to think about in terms of how we can continue to influence others. We also have decision-making processes that could be considered as well, involvement and things of that nature. So anyways, if you have any questions, please feel free to touch base. Again, please rewind and take a look at the video as you need to in other places. Otherwise, have a great and fantastic day.